So I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Everybody could kind of take a seat, come back to order. So next we're going to hear from Hardwick Township Committeeman and incoming President of the League of Municipalities, Jim Perry. Jim has been a League Executive Board member since 2013. He's a member of the League's Legislative Committee and the League's Emergency Management Preparedness Team. He's also a member of the League's 100th Anniversary Committee. He's served on the Hardwick Township Committee since 2000 and is in his sixth term. He chairs the Township Budget Committee, has served on various committees including the DPW, Grants, Local Public Safety, and Open Space Committees. He's been serving his community in general since 1995, starting with an appointment to the Environmental Committee and is a 20-year Planning Board member. He's also served as Recreation Director for 3 years. He served as the President of the Warren County League of Municipalities, President of the Warren County Governing Officials Association, member of the Warren County Heroin and Opioid Task Force. He also serves on the New Jersey Conference of Mayors, Board of Directors, the Legislative Committee, the Gun Safety Committee, and the Bylaws Committee. He's volunteered as Vice President of North Warren Little League and has coached youth baseball, football, and basketball. He's a local business owner of Comtech Solutions, a computer repair business since 2000. He was born and raised in East Rutherford before moving to Hardwick in 1993. He attended Fairleigh Dickinson University. He has 2 children, a daughter Alyssa, who's 27, a Rutgers graduate and current math teacher at Morris Knowles High School, and had a son, Jesse James, who sadly passed away at age 23 in 2015. Jesse had graduated from Moravian College in Bethlehem. So Jim is here today to share some of his personal story and also his perspective as somebody who's going to be the incoming president of the League of Municipalities. So welcome, Jim, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon. I can't believe I've done all that. It's a long list. And yes, that goes to show that all the politicians that everybody's been talking about all day that haven't been getting things done, I'm one of those politicians. However, I am working to get things done. Okay, my name, like you said, is Jim Perry. I'm on the town council in Hardwick, New Jersey. I was mayor for 6 years. I'm past president at the New Jersey Conference of Mayors, current vice president at the New Jersey League of Municipalities. In November, I will be sworn in as the 104th president of that organization, and I am here today to talk about my drug problem. Sometimes this is hard to get through. On Thursday night, October 15th of 2015, I spent 3 hours on the phone with my son Jesse, who lived in Florida at the time, where he had just secured a great job as a computer programmer. The reason for the long call, we were both Met fans, and the Mets were playing the Dodgers in the playoffs, and we watched the game together over the phone talking. We discussed everything about the game and many other topics. At one point during the conversation, my son said, "Dad, I really wish I was there watching it with you." The game ended happily with the Mets beating the Dodgers 3-2. The last thing he said to me was, "Good night, Dad, I love you." I told him I loved him back and we would talk soon. I didn't speak to him for over the weekend at all, and Monday morning I tried calling him and I was getting no answer. But I attributed it to him being at work and just not being able to talk. So at 5 o'clock I started calling him again, and now it was going straight to voicemail. And now I was starting to worry. By 7 o'clock I had called his mother and told her that I wasn't able to get in touch with him. And she told me I was overreacting, but I said I was going to call the front gate of his apartment to do a check. They went and checked. His car was there, his lights were on, but nobody was answering the door. So then I called the Ocala police because they're the only ones that could enter the apartment. And at this point, I was pacing the kitchen floor, and I knew it wasn't going to end well. 8:45, approximately 8:45, 9 o'clock, Ocala police called back with probably what was the worst call of my life. That my son was found dead on his apartment floor, and excuse me. He was found deceased on his apartment floor. Right away, I knew I dropped to the floor, screaming, crying. I asked if I could call back in a few minutes after I gained my composure. So after I called back, the very first thing that went through my mind was there any drugs in the apartment? You see, my daughter and I had suspected something was going on because of his personality changes over the last few months. Nobody else suspected it or saw it. However, we did. So they said, yes, we found what we believe is cocaine on his coffee table. And sorry for the tears. Then I obviously had to call my ex-wife and let her know. And then my sister came over to drive me to Morristown to do the hardest thing I ever had to do, was let my daughter know that she lost her brother to drugs. So when I got down to Morristown, she was just getting to her driveway. She was with her cousins. She was just getting home. And as soon as she saw me, she knew something was wrong. She dropped to her knees and said, "My brother's dead, isn't he?" So we sat there on the driveway ground for I don't know how long. And so we eventually started making plans to go to Florida to take care of things. And I'm way off, way off on my what I had written down here. As far as how he passed away, we didn't get the toxicology report back for 3 months. But I knew what it was going to tell me when we got it back. It ended up being that he died of a fentanyl overdose. However, in those first few months, I was ashamed to tell people this. I was worried of ruining my son's beautiful life. I was pushing a false narrative of some kind of heart problem, but that is what the stigma does. And I'll get to that in a moment. It doesn't end there. 1 year later, 1 week later, I received a call from my sister that my niece, she lives in Tuckerton, New Jersey, that they found my niece Amber dead on her bed in her bedroom of a heroin overdose. You see, when Jesse was alive, I suspected something. I kept thinking to myself, not my son. It can't be that bad if he's doing something. His mother was in total denial and said, no, he would never do anything. His sister was the only one who was really not buying it into the whole not my brother thing. They were closer than any siblings I have ever known, and I see I see that now, how right she was and how tortured she was being so helpless. While the pain of losing them never goes away, I move on and I have dedicated my life to fighting this war on drugs. In 2018, I was chosen by Law Enforcement Against Drugs LEAD as the Mayor of the Year for 2017 for all that I do to fight the problem. It was an honor to be recognized for trying to prevent someone else from going through the misery that my family and most of all my daughter, my son's mother, and myself have gone through. Although I do work with trying to get help for the individuals who are struggling with the disease, I try and focus my attention on the higher levels of the battle. Over the last few years, I've worked with many different organizations and state legislators, both Governor Christie and Governor Murphy, to try to make a difference. Now, going off script here a little bit, one of the conversations that you've been having is the legislators and politicians aren't doing anything. And I agree. I've talked to many of them. To your face, they seem like they care, and they do. But I could tell you, like through the League of Municipalities, Conference of Mayors, that the top 5 issues that always come up in the state are taxes, school funding, COA, the transportation fund, a few other things. Drugs are never in that top 5. Sometimes I don't even see it in the top 10. To me, it's number 1. And one of the problems is none of these politicians, it doesn't affect them because it hasn't happened to them. And I can say I'm just as guilty. On August 14th of 2015, I was one of those, not realizing how bad the problem was. I found out a quick day later. And since then, I've been fighting the battle to try to get something more done. And hopefully, as the president of the League of Municipalities, is going to give me the platform to work with a lot of these great groups that were here today, that, let me tell you, your presentations, very powerful. And, you know, I have so many things I'd love to talk to all of you about. Some of the ideas I have is, one, is to standardize a state sanctioned program in our schools to educate the young people across the state on a drug program. We used to have the DARE program that sort of went out the door. I know LEAD, which is not LEAP, yours is organization's LEAP, very close. LEAD, Law Enforcement Against Drugs, is a program that does this throughout the schools. Actually, it's the same executive director that used to be in DARE. I am trying to get a bill sponsored called the Narcan bill, which would make it mandatory for anyone who has been revived with Narcan by the police or EMS to do a 90-day in-house drug treatment program. We also have to go after the insurance companies. There is a bill that they have to pay, but they make it so hard for any treatment programs for these people to make any payments. And obviously we are already going after the drug companies, but we have to do more there. But I also have many other ideas. However, the only way this epidemic is going to end is to have control at the top levels, and programs such as what we are here for today as a standard program statewide and throughout the whole USA. There are so many organizations organized to fight this problem in many communities around the country. Don't misunderstand me, they all do great work. But without a standard policy from town to town, county to county, and state to state, we will never beat this deadly problem. I often compare the first Gulf War to the first Gulf War when Iraq invaded Kuwait. President Bush didn't go into the war with guns blazing on our own. He formed a coalition with 70 different countries, and that made the war quite short. And that is what we need to do here. We need to form as a coalition. We need to get organized and work together instead of having all these little organizations fighting little battles. I also have spoke throughout the state on the stigma that goes along with the issue. I am one who lost my son 3 years ago, but I am not ashamed of my son or who he was. Anyone that knew him knew his kind personality and the loving person he was. They remember him as a star high school athlete, a talented musician who would go out of his way to help anybody. Nobody knew he had a drug problem. It shows that the old stigma of who it is that is using drugs is not what we remember. It could be anyone. The stigma often says that they chose to get addicted. That is not true. The disease chose them. The stigma says my child was a number. The truth says my child was more than a number. The stigma says my child made bad choices. The truth says my child did not choose addiction. The stigma says my child was a junkie. The truth says my child had a disease. The stigma says my child was a criminal. The truth says my child had hopes and dreams. The stigma says my child had poor parenting. The truth says my child was raised with love. The stigma says my child was lazy. The truth says my child wanted to get well. The stigma says my child was selfish. The truth says my child was changed by drugs. The stigma says my child was hard-hearted. The truth says my child had a big heart. The stigma says my child was dirty. The truth says my child was sick. The stigma says my child did not matter. The truth says my child mattered deeply. The problem with the stigma around drug abuse is really the stories we tell ourselves as a society. We need to change the culture of the topic and make it okay to speak about it without shame. It's time to end the stigma and to end this war once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Jim for sharing his story. Obviously not an easy thing to do. We just really appreciate him doing that with us today. So I know, again, we're over time. Just bear with me on a few housekeeping items before I kind of wrap us up for the day. So everyone will receive an evaluation. Please give us your feedback. Please tell us what you found impactful about today, what we can do to improve for next time around. We really value your feedback and we'll absolutely utilize it. We encourage everyone to fill out the survey. If you need public health credits, it's required. As I mentioned this morning, make sure to check that PH box on there. We will add you to a harm reduction listserv to stay involved and be part of this work as it moves forward. We'll also be sending all the slides and any recordings from today to everyone after the event. Please drop off your name badge protectors on the way out. We're going to reuse them. A couple of plugs for upcoming events that we invite you to attend. So the New Jersey Department of Human Services, Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services is holding its first annual opioid summit on Friday, September 20th at the Atlantic City Convention Center. This is the event that Dr. Eilers mentioned a short while ago. And also First Lady Tammy Murphy and the New Jersey Department of Health in partnership